This is the Complete Frontend Developer Roadmap for 2025. Whether you're a beginner aiming to land your first job or an intermediate developer looking to fill in the gaps and level up, this guide will show you exactly what to learn and how to stay on track. I'll break down exactly what you need to learn, how long it will take, and what's essential versus what's optional. Plus, I'll share bonus skills to help you stand out in job applications. It's the roadmap I wish I had when I was starting out, because back then I wasted a lot of time and months on irrelevant tutorials and didn't know what to focus on. That's why I created this roadmap to give you a clear path and save you from making the same mistakes. And to help you on this journey, I've also created a free roadmap template to track your progress along with project ideas to practice these skills. You can grab your copy from the link in the description. Let's start with the foundational tools and technologies you need to learn. Front-end development starts from understanding how the web works. You need to learn about the domain names and DNS, things like how websites are mapped to IP addresses and how the DNS keeps track of the domain names and their relevant IP addresses. Here you'll also learn about the HTTP and HTTPS, which is how data travels between browsers and servers. And this will help you understand how browsers fetch and render content, which is important for later for debugging and optimizing website performance. Here you just need to spend 1 to 2 days maximum to learn the basics of how the web works. Next, you need to set up your workspace and coding environment. These are things like the code editor that you need to choose. Some popular options here are the VS Code, WebStorm, and Sublime Text. Nowadays we also have AI code editors, which are things like Cursor AI or Windsurf. So my recommendation here, if you want to go with regular code editor, then choose VS Code. And if you want AI code editor, then both Cursor AI and also the Windsurf are good options here. And whichever code editor you choose, you will need to install some extensions here. Things like Prettier for formatting your code, or Spell Checker to check your code, or Live Server to be able to run servers locally on your computer. You also need a terminal for running scripts and version control, but all of these code editors come with built-in terminals, so you don't need to set up a separate terminal. The built-in terminal within your code editor is more than enough to get started. And workspace setup shouldn't take you more than 1 day, so you just need 1 day to download the code editor setup extensions, and maybe even less than 1 day, but 1 day maximum. Once you have your workspace set up and you also understand how the web works, next you need to dive into HTML and CSS. HTML defines the structure of your website. Things like headings, paragraphs, links, buttons, these are all defined by HTML. It's like the skeleton of your website. Here you'll learn about things like tags. These are HTML tags that define the structure. For example, paragraphs are defined with p tag or images are defined with image tag. And you'll also learn about the latest semantic tags. And other foundational concepts that you will learn in HTML are elements and attributes. For example, source attributes, which you can attach to image tags, or class attributes, which you can attach to any tag and add class names to them, so that you can style them later in CSS. And also about elements, which are the tags along with their content. But learning HTML alone doesn't make much sense, because it's primarily for structuring content. To create visually appealing websites, you need to pair it with CSS. CSS is for controlling the layout, colors, and spacing of your web pages. And here you'll learn about concepts like selectors, which is how you can select HTML elements from the screen. For example, you can select them by tag names or by class names or by IDs. Next, you'll learn about the box model. These are things like paddings, borders, and margins that you can apply for each element. Another concept in CSS is positioning. You can also use the position property to align the elements on the screen. For example, you can set static, relative, or absolute positioning. Next concept in CSS is layouts. For instance, we have the flexbox and grid layouts. You can use flexbox to center a login form on the screen, or you can use grid to create a dashboard layout. And responsive design is also very important, because nowadays most of the websites are designed for mobile as well, and not only for desktop. So you need to learn how to adapt your designs for mobile, desktop, and also tablet views. Then, as you can see, we also have some bonus points for CSS, but let's come back to the bonus points later once we go through the essentials. So here, spending somewhere around 1 month is more than enough to get familiar with HTML and CSS and the basics of building websites. After that, you need to move on to the next topic, which is JavaScript. JavaScript adds interactivity to our web pages. It's used for everything from form validation to dynamic content updates. And it's also the core language for front-end development. You need to learn this before learning any front-end frameworks like React. For example, you can use JavaScript to validate a sign-up form or create a drop-down menu. Here you can start from basics, which are variables, data types, functions, and conditionals in JavaScript. Next, you'll learn about the other built-in data types, which are arrays and objects in JavaScript, which are very useful for large applications. The other important topic here is DOM, or Document Object Model, which helps you to control the elements on the screen. So you can select elements on the web page or modify them or apply some stylings. And all of this is possible by using the Document Object Model. You can also attach event listeners, for example, to listen for events. For instance, you can listen for button click events or key press events and then perform some actions based on these events. Next, you can learn about the debugging of JavaScript, how to use the browser developer tools to debug, and also how to use the basic console log debugging, so that whenever you have bugs or errors in your application, you are able to debug it. And you also need to learn about asynchronous JavaScript. You need to learn about the single-threaded model of JavaScript and the event loop, which helps JavaScript to execute those asynchronous tasks. Promises and callbacks, which are also part of asynchronous JavaScript, and also the fetch API, which will help you to fetch data from external APIs. Here you can spend somewhere from 1 to 2 months for learning JavaScript fundamentals like variables, functions, DOM manipulation, and all of the other things. And after that, you can move on to the next topic. The next topic after JavaScript is version control. This is used for tracking changes in your code and collaborating with other developers. This is not a big topic in itself. You only need to learn about Git, which is used for tracking changes in your code, and GitHub, which will help you to collaborate with other developers and also showcase your projects. For example, you can create a GitHub repository and push your code there, and other developers can pull that repository and make changes and then push again. So this way you can both collaborate on the same project. And GitHub also has alternatives like GitLab or Bitbucket, but GitHub is the largest platform for collaboration, and I think knowing only GitHub is more than enough along with Git. You can dive deep into Git concepts, which will take you a lot of time, but you just need to know the basics, and just learning the basics should be around 1 week of work, so you just need 1 week to practice Git and GitHub. After learning version control, you need to pick a front-end framework to learn. These frameworks simplify the process of building web applications by providing reusable components and tools. The popular options here are Angular, Vue.js, Svelte, and React. But React is the most popular framework out of these, and if you want to have more job opportunities and options, then you need to go with React, because there are more job opportunities and job postings with React compared to any other framework here. So if you choose to start with React, you will start with the basics, which are JSX syntax, and the components, which are a fundamental building blocks of React. Then you'll learn about the props and state, which help us to update the UI of our React application by just updating the props and states in our code. You'll learn about event handling specifically in React by using methods like onClick or onChange. For example, you can use the onChange methods on inputs to listen for user events, and once they type something in the input, you can perform some actions or call some functions. Next, you'll learn about the component lifecycle in React, which is an important topic there. This is basically how the component is mounted on the screen, and then how it is updated based on these prop and state updates, and also how it is unmounted from the screen. And to control this lifecycle, we have a concept which is called hooks in React. These hooks allow us to hook into the lifecycle of these components. For example, we can access the updating phase or the unmounting phase or mounting phase and update the state and props accordingly as we want. Another common topic in React is using lists and keys. So whenever you're listing similar components on the screen, let's say an image gallery, You will need to set unique keys for all of these gallery items so that React knows how to update these properly. Then you'll learn about the forms and how to control forms in React, and also things like React Router, which lets you to have multiple pages in your web application. Because without React Router, you will just have a one-page web application, but if you plan on having multiple pages and also navigation between those, then you need to use React Router to be able to navigate between those pages. And the other topic is state management in React. You have the component level state management with the state in React, but whenever your application gets larger and now you need a centralized place for managing the state, you will need some centralized state management. And for that, React also comes with Context API, which is a built-in API in React, so you can use this tool to manage the state in large applications. And while learning about React, you will also learn about package managers along the way, because you will need to use one of these package managers to build React applications. These are package managers like npm, yarn, or pnpm. These are just tools that help us manage libraries and dependencies in your project. For example, the React router that we talked about, this is a library, and we install this library by the help of npm, yarn, or pnpm. Or another example is you can install a library like Axios for API requests with a single command. So in total, learning React along with package managers should take you around 2 months to complete. This should be enough for you to learn the React basics, hooks, state management, and also build some example application. And these are the absolute essential skills if you want to become a front-end developer. But as you see, we have some bonuses in our roadmap. Let's come back and talk about those bonus skills that you can learn to stand out among other developers. Once you have built some applications with CSS, you can also learn about advanced CSS skills. This includes things like CSS variables. Actually, CSS variables isn't an advanced skill, and you can learn this along with CSS. But you can, for example, learn preprocessors in CSS. These are tools that add extra functionality to CSS, like variables, mixins, and more. They provide you with extra functionality similar to HTML. You can nest styles here in CSS. You can use variables, although you can use variables in pure CSS as well. But there are more features to it like partials, modules, mixins, inheritance, and so on. And the popular options here are Sass, Stylus, and Less. And if you're going to pick one of those, I would choose Sass here because that's the most popular option. And preprocessors isn't that large topic once you know CSS, so you can learn this within a week. And next we also have CSS frameworks. These are frameworks like Tailwind or Bootstrap. These tools also simplify the styling with pre-built utility classes. For example, you can have utility classes for a button, for a primary button, for a secondary button, and so on. And these are provided out of the box with Tailwind and Bootstrap, which speeds up the development. Compared to preprocessors, this is a bit larger topic, so you would probably need to spend around 2 to 3 weeks here to learn about one of these frameworks, and I would recommend starting with Tailwind because that's the most popular option right now. These are the bonus points for CSS. Now let's have a look at JavaScript bonus points. I recommend you also use linters and formatters in your code. For example, in your code editor, if you already installed the extensions, you would have also the prettier formatter, and this just helps you to automatically format your code without manually applying it. And I recommend you also learn about the ESLint, which is a linter that helps you to keep your code clean. Next, you can also learn about the modules in JavaScript, how to import and export modules. And most likely you'll be familiar with this already, since you already learned about the React and front-end frameworks, so modules shouldn't be a new topic for you. Another bonus point is to learn about module bundlers like Vite and Webpack, which help us to make our JavaScript code production ready. Another common topic in JavaScript is memory leaks, and this is especially an interview question, so I would recommend you to learn about memory leaks in JavaScript. And again, browser developer tools, which is also mentioned here, but you can go deeper into browser developer tools and explore all of the tabs like Network tab, Sources tab, Elements tab, and learn how to debug there effectively. And lastly, you can learn about the web APIs. You would already know about the DOM and fetch, which are part of the web API, and you learn about them here and here. but you can continue exploring the other APIs such as local storage, I18 for internalization, service workers, and other common web APIs. And here again, if you decide to go too deep into each topic, you could spend a lot of time here, but I recommend just spending 1 to 2 weeks here to just be familiar with all of these topics. Next, as you can see, we also have TypeScript here in the bonus skills, and you will find a lot of job postings that also include TypeScript in the job requirements, so knowing this will set you apart from other developers. TypeScript is just a superset of JavaScript which adds type safety to reduce the runtime errors. For example, you can use TypeScript to catch issues early, like passing the wrong type of data to a function. First, learn about the statically versus dynamically typed languages, which are JavaScript versus TypeScript, for example. Then learn about the types and interfaces in TypeScript, which help us to define the types of the variables. Then some common utility types in TypeScript, which are things like peek, omit, record, and so on. And here it's also a good opportunity to learn about the object-oriented versus functional programming. You could learn this in JavaScript part as well, but I think it will make more sense to learn about it here with a statically typed language like TypeScript. And lastly, you can explore generics, which are also used often in TypeScript, and maybe some advanced topics like decorators, which might come up during the TypeScript interviews. And in terms of the timeline, I think you can just spend 2 to 3 weeks here to learn about the TypeScript basics and how to apply this in JavaScript and React projects. These were the bonuses of JavaScript. Now let's have a look what other bonuses do we have with front-end frameworks. Once you know how to develop applications with one of these front-end frameworks, I also recommend you learn about hosting your website so that you can deploy it to some real internet server. Static hosting should be more than enough for your front-end projects. You can try using tools like GitHub Pages, Netlify, or Vercel for deploying your static website. And maybe also get familiar with dynamic hosting, tools like Heroku, Render. These are mostly for hosting your full-stack applications. If you have just a front-end application, then static hosting should be enough for you. But be familiar with dynamic hosting as well if you plan on expanding to full-stack development. Here you can just spend 1 to 3 days to learn about the static hosting and deploy your website to one of these providers. And the last bonus section that we have is regarding the React. After learning the basics of React, I recommend you also learn about the built-in components and APIs that React provides. For instance, you can learn about the built-in components like Suspense and Fragment, or built-in APIs like Memo and Lazy. Using CSS in JS format is also very popular, and a lot of React projects use CSS in JS libraries. I recommend you also learn about the syntax of using CSS inside of JavaScript files. Then from the hooks, you can learn about the common hooks like useEffect, useState, useContext. Actually, you might not need useContext with the features of React 19. You might just use the use hook here. And also useMemo and useCallback might become obsolete after React 19 features, which introduces smarter way for optimizing your code. So you might not need these optimizations like useMemo and useCallback. And actually it will become easier to learn React than before the React 19 features. That's why you can also learn about the React 19 features to learn about the latest features and which parts of those you can skip. And actually by the time of this recording, React 19 is already out, so I recommend you starting with the latest version of React. Then you can learn about some advanced topics like higher order components. These are components that accept other components as input, or they return other components as the output. You can also learn about the server-side rendering and single-page application, and learn how server-side rendering might help you to optimize the SEO of your website. And some advanced state management, so if the context API isn't enough for your application, in these cases, people might use advanced state managements like Redux, Zustand, Recoil, which are external state management providers and not built in React. So optionally, you might learn about one of these. Redux was the golden standard before, but because of its complexity, it has lost its popularity. So if you're going to learn about one of these state management tools, I recommend either Zustand or Recoil. Learning the basics of these topics should also take you around 3 weeks. I think 3 weeks is optimal to spend to learn about these topics. And if you'd like to learn more about server-side rendering and also frameworks, you can pick a meta framework, and my recommendation is Next.js. Next.js simplifies the routing and server-side rendering for React applications. If you're already familiar with React, this should take you around 4 weeks to learn about Next.js and maybe build one example project with it. Then we also have automated testing, which some companies might list as a requirement. These are automated tests which you can write to catch bugs before they happen. For example, you can write unit and integration tests with tools like Jest or vtest. And this can test the functionality of one of your React components. Let's say this is a form component. You can test its functionality with tools like Jest. And for instance, if you modified it and you broke something, your automated tests will let you know in advance before you ship your code to production. And an advanced version of this is writing end-to-end testing with tools like Cypress and Playwright. For example, here you can test the whole flow of your application, like the sign-in page. You can have your end-to-end test to write the login and password in the sign-in page and see if it signs in properly or rejects it properly or handles the errors properly and things like that. These things are handled by end-to-end testing. Although end-to-end testing might be a bit complex for beginners, so I recommend just learning about unit and integration testing. And spending another 3 weeks here should be enough for you to know how to write unit and integration tests. And that was the last bonus point related to front-end frameworks. After knowing all of these bonuses, you will stand a higher chance of being hired as a front-end developer compared to other developers who don't know these bonus skills. Now let's answer the question, how long does it take to become a front-end developer? First of all, the timelines that I mentioned are rough estimates because it depends on how much time you can put in daily to become a developer. If you're consistent, it can take about 6 months, and if you're learning on the side, it might take closer to a year. But the key here isn't about the speed, but about the consistency. If you're consistently learning daily or weekly and improving your skills and following a clear roadmap like the one I shared here, you will land your first developer job sooner or later, and such a roadmap will also help you stay focused and avoid distractions and actually get there. And don't forget to grab your free copy of this roadmap and also the roadmap template that I've created, which includes project ideas to practice these skills and track your progress. The link will be in the description.